The words cut deeper than any blade, each syllable a shard of glass sinking into my skin. "Beggar!" they sneered, their voices echoing in the grand hall, a hall that would soon be mine. They reveled in their perceived victory, their laughter a symphony of cruelty orchestrated just for me. I stood there, a silent statue amidst their revelry, the storm of their contempt washing over me. But beneath the surface, a different kind of storm was brewing, a tempest of retribution that would soon engulf them all. If you've ever been betrayed by your own blood, if you believe family should lift you up, not tear you down, subscribe now so we can find justice together. I had always been the outsider, the black sheep of the family, or so they made me believe. My father, bless his soul, saw something in me they never could, a fire, a resilience, a spirit that refused to be quenched. He nurtured that spark, guiding me, teaching me, preparing me for a future they assumed would be theirs. But fate, as it often does, had a different plan. My father's sudden passing left me vulnerable, exposed to the wolves who had always circled, their eyes gleaming with avarice. They saw an opportunity to seize what they believed was rightfully theirs, to cast me aside and claim the inheritance that my father had intended for me, for Madison. They underestimated me, mistaking my grief for weakness, my silence for submission. They thought they could manipulate me, intimidate me, force me to relinquish my claim. They were wrong. The reading of the will was a farce, a carefully orchestrated charade designed to humiliate me. My uncle, a man whose heart was as black as his soul, presided over the proceedings, his voice dripping with false sympathy as he announced the terms. The vast majority of the estate, the family businesses, the properties, all of it was to be divided amongst them, my cousins, my aunts, everyone but me. I was to receive a pittance, a token gesture, a sum barely enough to keep me afloat. They called it generous, a testament to their goodwill. I called it theft, a blatant act of betrayal. They watched me, their eyes filled with a mixture of triumph and malice, waiting for me to break, to crumble, to beg for mercy. But I refused to give them the satisfaction. I stood tall, my head held high, my face an impassive mask. Inside, however, a volcano was simmering, the molten lava of my rage slowly building pressure, waiting for the moment to erupt. The final insult came after the reading, a casual remark uttered by my cousin, the one I had always considered my friend. "Look at you, Madison," she sneered, her voice laced with venom, "a beggar in your own family." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. I simply smiled, a thin, cold smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "Is that so?" I replied, my voice soft, almost a whisper. "Perhaps you should take a closer look." I knew at that moment that revenge was not just an option, it was a necessity. It was the only way to reclaim what was rightfully mine, to restore my honor, to make them pay for their treachery. The plan began to form in my mind, a meticulous, calculated strategy that would exploit their weaknesses, expose their lies, and ultimately bring them to their knees. The person I trusted most was one of them. The world shifted. The grand hall, once a symbol of my future, now felt like a gilded cage, the bars closing in on me with each passing day. My attempts to reason with my family were met with cold indifference, their ears deaf to my pleas, their hearts hardened against me. They reveled in their newfound power, flaunting their wealth, their success, their complete and utter dominance. I tried to appeal to their sense of decency, to remind them of the bonds we once shared, of the love and respect we had supposedly held for one another. But it was all in vain. Their greed had consumed them, turning them into unrecognizable monsters, driven by a thirst for more, a hunger that could never be satisfied. Sleepless nights became my constant companion, the weight of their injustice pressing down on me, suffocating me. The memories of my father, of his kindness, his wisdom, his unwavering belief in me, haunted my waking hours, fueling my resolve, hardening my heart. I would not let them win. I would not let his legacy be tarnished by their avarice. I would fight back, tooth and nail, until justice was served. The days that followed were a blur of legal battles and financial maneuvering. I pored over documents, searching for loopholes, for any advantage I could exploit. But I was outmatched, outgunned, facing a team of seasoned lawyers and ruthless accountants, all of whom were in my uncle's pocket. My resources dwindled, my hopes faded, and the walls continued to close in. They tightened their grip, cutting off my access to funds, spreading rumors about my incompetence, poisoning the minds of anyone who might have been willing to help me. I watched as my reputation crumbled, as my friends turned away, as I became an outcast, a pariah in my own world. The isolation was crushing, the loneliness unbearable, but I refused to break. I clung to the memory of my father's words, his unwavering belief in my strength, his constant reminder that I was capable of anything I set my mind to. He had prepared me for this, for the inevitable moment when I would have to face the darkness alone. Desperation clawed at me. I considered every option, every possible avenue of escape. I even contemplated leaving it all behind, disappearing into the shadows, starting a new life far away from their toxic influence. But the thought of allowing them to win, of letting them get away with their treachery, was unbearable. It was a betrayal of my father's memory, a surrender to their cruelty. I knew that I couldn't run, that I had to stand my ground and fight, no matter the cost. So I dug in my heels, refusing to yield, refusing to surrender. I began to meticulously document their every move, every lie, every shady transaction. I gathered evidence, building a case that would eventually expose their corruption and bring them crashing down. It was a slow, painstaking process, but I was patient, determined, fueled by a burning desire for revenge. The plan began to take shape, a complex web of deception and manipulation that would turn their own greed against them. Their biggest mistake: they thought they were untouchable. They believed that their wealth and power shielded them from any consequences, that they could act with impunity, that they were above the law. They underestimated my resolve, my cunning, my unwavering commitment to justice. They had no idea what was coming. I remember one particularly cold evening, staring out the window at the city lights, each one a tiny spark of hope in the vast darkness. My hands were shaking, my body exhausted, but my mind was clear. I saw their downfall as plain as day. They had left a trail of crimson, a record of their crimes etched into every transaction, every contract, every whispered conversation. And I was going to expose it all. The first step was to find someone on the inside, someone who was disillusioned, someone who had been wronged by them, someone who was willing to betray their trust. And I knew exactly who to target. My cousin Emily, the one who had delivered the final insult, the one who had called me a beggar. She was their weak link, the crack in their armor, the key to their destruction. The realization that Emily was my only hope was a bitter pill to swallow. She was, after all, one of them. But I knew her secrets, her resentments, the unspoken truths that simmered beneath her carefully constructed facade. She had always been envious of my relationship with my father, jealous of the attention he lavished upon me. And she harbored a deep-seated loathing for my cousin, Jessica, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. I decided to use that envy, that loathing, as leverage. I started subtly, a carefully crafted text message here, a seemingly innocuous phone call there, probing her, testing her, gauging her level of discontent. At first, she was guarded, suspicious of my motives. But as I slowly revealed the extent of their deception, the full scope of their betrayal, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a spark of shared resentment. I told her about the evidence I had gathered, the documents I had copied, the conversations I had recorded. I painted a picture of their future, a future where they would continue to prosper at her expense, where she would always be second best, a mere pawn in their game. The turning point came during a family dinner, a lavish affair held at my uncle's mansion. I had been invited, a calculated move on their part, a way to flaunt their victory, to further humiliate me. I arrived late, dressed in a simple black dress, my face devoid of emotion. I circulated through the room, exchanging pleasantries with the guests, all the while observing them, studying them, searching for any sign of weakness. When I saw Emily alone, nursing a glass of wine, I approached her. "They're using you, you know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. "I know," she replied, her voice trembling. But what can I do? Help me, I said, my voice firm. Help me expose them. I laid out my plan, explaining in detail how she could assist me, how she could provide the missing pieces of the puzzle, how she could bring them all crashing down. She listened intently, her expression changing from doubt to determination. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice filled with resolve. I'll help you. That night I didn't sleep. The weight of the world seemed to settle on my shoulders. The betrayal by my own family had left a gaping wound, a hollowness that threatened to consume me. Doubts gnawed at me. Was I doing the right thing? Was revenge worth the cost? Would I become as ruthless, as heartless as them? I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the face staring back at me. The naive, trusting girl I once was had vanished, replaced by a hardened, determined woman, consumed by a thirst for retribution. My reflection scared me, but I knew I couldn't turn back. I had come too far, sacrificed too much. I had a promise to keep, a legacy to uphold. The memory of my father's face, his unwavering belief in me, spurred me on. I would not let him down. I would not let them win. I would expose their lies, reclaim what was rightfully mine, and restore my honor. The following weeks were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and covert operations. Emily, risking everything, fed me information, provided me with documents, and guided me through the labyrinthine world of their finances. She revealed their hidden accounts, their offshore investments, their secret deals, all meticulously concealed behind layers of legal jargon and corporate shell games. I worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle, connecting the dots, building an airtight case that would leave them no room to maneuver. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. Their greed knew no bounds. They had cheated, lied, and stolen their way to the top, trampling on anyone who stood in their path. They had destroyed lives, ruined businesses, and left a trail of broken dreams in their wake. And they had done it all with a smile on their faces, pretending to be pillars of the community, paragons of virtue. As the evidence mounted, I felt a surge of power, a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. I was no longer the victim, the helpless pawn in their game. I was the architect of their downfall, the puppet master pulling the strings. The transformation was intoxicating, but also terrifying. I knew that I was walking a dangerous path, that the consequences of my actions could be devastating. But I was prepared to face them. I had nothing left to lose. The day they tried to end me, I started preparing to expose the truth. The day they tried to end me was the day I became a ghost. I smiled. I played their game, but I was recording everything. Every word, every transaction, every hidden glance. I invested in state-of-the-art surveillance equipment, tiny cameras disguised as everyday objects, microphones that could pick up a pin drop from across the room. I turned my home into a fortress, a digital vault where I could safely store the evidence I was gathering. My days were spent attending family functions, smiling and nodding, feigning ignorance. But my nights were dedicated to analyzing data, piecing together the puzzle, preparing for the moment when I would unleash my fury. I learned about forensic accounting, about digital security, about the intricacies of corporate law. I became a student of their crimes, mastering the details of their deception. It was a dangerous game, a high-stakes gamble that could cost me everything. But I was willing to take the risk. I had to. One close call stands out vividly. I had planted a hidden camera in my uncle's office, disguised as a pen holder. It was strategically positioned to capture his conversations with his lawyers, the discussions where they plotted their next move against me. Everything was going smoothly until one day, my cousin Jessica decided to rearrange his desk. She picked up the pen holder, examined it closely, and almost discovered the camera. My heart leaped into my throat. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as she turned the pen holder over in her hands. Just when I thought she was about to expose it, she set it back down, seemingly without suspicion. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was a stark reminder of the risks I was taking, of the razor's edge I was walking. I needed to be more careful. To ensure my safety, I created a dead man's switch, a digital failsafe that would automatically release the evidence to the authorities if anything were to happen to me. It was a simple program, triggered by my inactivity, a safeguard against their potential attempts to silence me permanently. I entrusted the code to a trusted friend, someone outside the family, someone who knew nothing about the details of my plan. They simply held the key, the means to unleash the truth if I were to disappear or meet with an unfortunate accident. It was a morbid precaution, but a necessary one. I had to protect myself, to ensure that my story would be told, even if I couldn't be there to tell it myself. The tension was constant, a gnawing anxiety that never truly faded. I was living a double life, constantly looking over my shoulder, wary of every shadow, every unexpected phone call. I knew that they were watching me, that they were suspicious of my every move. But I couldn't let that deter me. I had to stay focused, to remain one step ahead of them, to continue gathering the evidence I needed to expose their crimes. The anticipation was agonizing, a slow burn that threatened to consume me. I wanted to strike, to unleash my fury, to watch them crumble before my eyes. But I knew that I had to be patient, to wait for the perfect moment, to ensure that my plan was foolproof. I spent countless hours refining my strategy, anticipating their every move, preparing for every possible contingency. I consulted with legal experts, with media strategists, with anyone who could offer me insight or guidance. I wanted to make sure that when I finally struck, it would be swift, decisive, and utterly devastating. I envisioned their faces, their expressions of shock and disbelief as their carefully constructed world came crashing down around them. I imagined the shame, the humiliation, the utter ruin that awaited them. It was a dark fantasy, a vengeful daydream that fueled my resolve and hardened my heart. But it was also a necessary one. It was the only way to keep me going, to sustain me through the long, arduous process of planning and preparation. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I began to finalize my plan. The central element involved exposing their financial crimes to the authorities, providing them with the irrefutable evidence they needed to launch a full-scale investigation. I had compiled a detailed report, outlining their fraudulent activities, their hidden assets, their illegal transactions. I had also gathered witness testimony, persuading former employees and business partners to come forward and share their stories. But I knew that simply presenting the evidence to the authorities wouldn't be enough. They were powerful, well-connected, and capable of burying the truth. I needed to create a media firestorm to expose their crimes to the public, to force the authorities to act. I reached out to investigative journalists, sharing my story, providing them with snippets of the evidence I had gathered. I knew that they would be intrigued, that they would see the potential for a blockbuster story. But I also knew that I had to be careful to protect my identity, to avoid alerting my family to my plans. I arranged for anonymous leaks, providing them with information through encrypted channels, ensuring that my involvement remained hidden. It was a delicate dance, a high-wire act that required precision, cunning, and a healthy dose of paranoia. But I was determined to pull it off. I had come too far to back down now. The final strike was imminent. The culmination of my efforts rested on a single piece of evidence, a digital file buried deep within my uncle's personal computer. It was a ledger, meticulously documenting every illegal transaction, every bribe, every kickback. It was the smoking gun, the irrefutable proof of their guilt. But accessing it was a challenge. The computer was heavily secured, protected by multiple layers of encryption and passwords. I needed Emily's help. She had access to the office, to the computer, to the system. She was the only one who could retrieve the file without raising suspicion. I tasked her with the mission, providing her with detailed instructions, with the tools she needed to bypass the security measures. She was hesitant, terrified of being caught, of facing the consequences of her actions. But I appealed to her sense of justice, to her desire for revenge. I reminded her of all the ways they had wronged her, of all the opportunities they had denied her. I convinced her that this was her chance to finally break free, to finally take control of her life. She agreed, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. The plan was set. The following day, Emily put the plan into action. She waited until everyone had left the office, until she was alone with the computer. She followed my instructions precisely, navigating through the system, bypassing the security measures, searching for the file. It was a tense, nerve-wracking process, each click of the mouse, each keystroke, filled with the risk of discovery. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she found it, the ledger. She copied it onto a portable drive, erased her tracks, and left the office, her heart pounding in her chest. She met me later that night, handing me the drive, her hands shaking. I took it, my fingers trembling with anticipation. I had it, the key to their downfall. I thanked her bravery, her sacrifice. I promised her that she would be rewarded, that she would finally get what she deserved. She smiled, a weary, relieved smile. "Just make them pay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. With the ledger in my possession, I finalized my plan. I reached out to the investigative journalist I had been in contact with, the one who had expressed the most interest in my story. I told him that I had the evidence, the irrefutable proof of their crimes. I arranged a meeting, a clandestine rendezvous in a remote location, far from the prying eyes of my family. I arrived at the meeting place, my heart pounding in my chest. I handed him the portable drive, the ledger, the culmination of months of planning and preparation. He took it, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He promised me that he would run with the story, that he would expose their crimes to the world. I trusted him. I had to. I had placed all my chips on this one final gamble. As he drove away, I felt a surge of exhilaration, a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. It was over. The game was over. They were finished. But my euphoria was short-lived. As I turned to leave, I saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was my cousin, Jessica. She was standing there, her face contorted with rage, her eyes blazing with fury. "I know what you've done," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can get away with this? You think you can destroy our family?" My blood ran cold. How did she find out? Who told her? It didn't matter. I was exposed. The game had changed. "It's over, Jessica," I said, my voice trembling. "They're going to pay for what they've done." She laughed, a cold, cruel laugh. "You're the one who's going to pay," she said, stepping closer. "You made a big mistake trying to cross us. Now you're going to regret it." She lunged at me, her hands outstretched, her eyes filled with malice. I braced myself for the impact, for the violence that was about to come. But then everything went black. The darkness was brief, a fleeting moment of nothingness. When I awoke, I was disoriented, my head throbbing. I was tied to a chair in a dimly lit room, Jessica standing over me, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "You shouldn't have done this," she hissed. "You left us no choice." Fear coiled in my stomach, but I refused to show it. "It's too late, Jessica," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "The evidence is out there. Everyone will know the truth." Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" I replied, meeting her gaze. "You should have thought of that before." At that moment, we heard sirens, distant at first but growing louder with each passing second. Jessica's eyes widened in panic. "What's going on?" she screamed. Before I could answer, the door burst open and police flooded into the room. Jessica was tackled to the ground, screaming and struggling. I was quickly unbound, relief washing over me as I saw the officers cuffing her. It was Emily who had called them. She had been following Jessica, worried about what she might do. She saved me. The following days were a whirlwind of media attention and legal proceedings. The investigative journalist ran the story, exposing my family's crimes in excruciating detail. The ledger was released to the public, revealing the full extent of their corruption. The authorities launched a full-scale investigation, raiding their offices, seizing their assets, and arresting those involved. The news spread like wildfire, dominating headlines and social media feeds. My family's reputation was shattered, their carefully constructed empire crumbling before their eyes. They were publicly shamed, ostracized by their peers, and facing years in prison. My uncle, the mastermind behind it all, looked utterly broken as he was led away in handcuffs. The shock, the disbelief, the utter ruin was etched on his face. My cousin Jessica, charged with assault and obstruction of justice, was denied bail. Their world was collapsing. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of detached satisfaction washing over me. They had tried to destroy me, to silence me, to steal my inheritance. Now they were paying the price. The company they had built, the legacy they had cherished, was tarnished beyond repair. Their names would forever be associated with greed, corruption, and betrayal. Emily received immunity for her cooperation and was given a substantial reward for her bravery. She used the money to start her own business, finally realizing her dreams. I, on the other hand, retreated from the spotlight, seeking solace in anonymity. I used my inheritance to help others, to support causes that were important to me. I found purpose in giving back, in making a positive impact on the world. One evening, I found myself sitting alone, reflecting on everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the revenge. It had been a long and arduous journey, one that had changed me in profound ways. I was no longer the naive, trusting girl I once was. I was a survivor, a warrior, a woman who had stared into the abyss and emerged stronger on the other side. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's the only way to restore balance, to hold those who have wronged you accountable. It's not about seeking pleasure in their suffering, but about reclaiming your power, your dignity, your life. They lost everything. I just smiled. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.